You don't need to be at the main table. Sit with the kids, that's fine. My sister Diane said it without looking up from her wine. The fork in her other hand stopped halfway to the plate when the man crossing the room got close. Frank Delgado. 61 years old, gray at the temples, a dish towel over one shoulder. He owned the place. He set down the tray of drinks he was carrying, and he straightened up the way a man straightens when something old wakes up inside him. "Colonel Calloway," he said. The whole room turned to look at me. I wish I could tell you that felt good. It didn't, I just felt tired. The kind of tired sleep doesn't fix. To understand why an old soldier's hands were shaking on a tray of sweet tea, you have to go back 31 years. To a kitchen in Asheville where my mother decided which of her 2 daughters was the one she'd be proud of, and which one she wouldn't. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. The morning of the engagement party, my knee told me it was going to rain. It does that. Right knee, just below the cap, where they put 2 screws back in 2004 after a Humvee rolled on a bad road outside Mosul. Most mornings it's nothing. A stiffness I work out on the kitchen floor, with a coffee getting cold beside me. But when the pressure drops, it aches in a low, steady way, like a phone buzzing in another room. That morning it ached. So I knew. By afternoon there'd be clouds over the Blue Ridge. I was standing at my counter in a little house outside Asheville, the kind of house nobody looks at twice. 1 story, brown brick, a flag on the porch post that my neighbor Earl raises and lowers like it's his own, which I don't mind. Inside there's nothing that announces anything. No shadow boxes on the wall, no framed orders. A retired Army colonel's pension is a comfortable thing, but you'd never know it from my furniture. I bought the couch off a Marine captain's wife who was PCSing to Germany and needed it gone by Friday. It's a good couch. I see no reason to replace a good couch. My family thought I did something with logistics for the government. That's the phrase my mother always used. Something with logistics. As if I drove a forklift in a warehouse and never quite came home. I let them think it. I want to be honest with you about why, because it matters for everything that comes after. It wasn't shame. I was never ashamed of a single day I wore the uniform. It was that I had spent 30 years being the person rooms got quiet for. Soldiers stood when I walked in. Young captains chose their words around me like they were stepping through a minefield, because in a sense they were. Careers turn on what a colonel writes in an evaluation. I sat across a desk from a brigadier general and told him his supply timeline was a fantasy, and he listened, because I was usually right. And after 30 years of that, what I wanted, what I was starving for, if I'm being plain, was to walk into my own mother's kitchen and just be Maggie. The younger one. Diane's little sister. Nobody who mattered. You'd think a family would give you that for free. Mine charged me for it my whole life. Let me tell you how it started, because nothing in a family ever starts at the party. It starts 30-40 years back in 100 small rooms, and by the time it gets to the party, it's just the last act of a play. Everybody's been rehearsing since you were small. When we were girls, Diane was the pretty one and I was the useful one. That's how my mother sorted us, and she sorted us early. And once a mother sorts you, it tends to stick to your ribs for life. Diane got the piano lessons. I got the chores. Diane got driven to her friends' houses. I got told that walking built character, which it does, though I've noticed character only ever got built on the one daughter. When Diane got into a little trouble in high school and she got into the regular kind, the kind that doesn't matter, my mother would sit up worrying. When I came home with a scholarship to ROTC, an actual paid way out of a town that didn't have much for us, my mother's first words were, "The Army." "Margaret, what will I tell people? What will I tell people?" That was the whole of it right there, in 7 words. My acceptance into something hard and rare, and her first thought was the explaining it would cost her at church. I left at 18 anyway, and I think I've had a long time to think about it. I think that leaving was the unforgivable thing. Not because they missed me. Because I proved I didn't need the size of the world they'd cut me down to fit. A family that has decided you are small does not watchang you stand up to your actual height somewhere they can't see it. It makes the cutting harder to keep believing in. So they stopped looking at the part of me that had grown, and they kept their eyes trained year after year on the small shape they'd already agreed on. 2 things I carried out of that house, and I've carried them so long they've worn grooves. The first is the not being thanked. I'm not too proud to say it plain. I wanted to be thanked. not paid back, not praised in front of the church, just seen. There's a particular ache in doing the heavy lifting of a family in the dark, and listening to someone else get credit for it at the dinner table, and smiling and passing the rolls. I got good at the smiling. I got good at passing the rolls. But the ache never went anywhere. It just got quiet, the way the knee gets quiet between rains. The second is the word. My father was a hard man who softened too late and died before he finished the job, and the one thing I learned from watching him was how much a child will do, for how long, chasing a sentence a parent can't say. I have commanded battalions. I have made decisions that ended in folded flags. And underneath all of it the whole time was a 54-year-old girl still half waiting for her mother to look at her and say, simply, "I'm proud of you." That's it. That's the whole engine. You'd be amazed how much of a strong woman's life can be run on the want of 3 small words. I'm telling you this now so that later, when I do the thing I do at the end of this, when I have the chance to hand my mother the proof and I don't take it, you'll understand it cost me something. It cost me everything that 54-year-old girl had been saving up. The party was for my niece. Diane's girl, Hannah, 26, and getting married to a sweet, soft-spoken man named Brett who managed a hardware store and looked at her like she'd hung the moon. I liked Brett. I liked Hannah too, though she'd grown up inside Diane's version of me. The aunt who ran off to the army, who missed everything, who couldn't be bothered with family. None of which was true. But you can't argue with a story a child is raised inside. You can only love them anyway and wait. The party was at a place called the Hearthstone, a restaurant on a county road south of town, the kind with a gravel lot and a smoker out back that perfumes the whole property with hickory before you even open your door. I didn't know who owned it. I just knew Diane had picked it, and Diane had a gift for picking places that were nice enough to impress the neighbors and cheap enough that she could later mention, quietly, how much of it she'd covered. She hadn't covered it, of course. I had. Nobody knew that yet. That part comes later, too. I got dressed slow that afternoon. Civilian clothes still feel like a costume on me, even now, 4 years out. I put on a navy blouse and gray slacks, and a pair of low heels I'd worn maybe 6 times. I dabbed on the little bit of makeup I'd had to relearn after a career of not bothering. In the mirror, I looked like exactly what I wanted to look like. A pleasant, ordinary woman in her 50s. Forgettable if you were foolish. My mother taught me that, actually. The looking ordinary part. She used to say back when she still said warm things to me. A woman of real character never has to announce herself. The world does the announcing. She also used to say, if you want to know who somebody truly is, let them believe you can't do a single thing for them. She forgot she taught me that. People forget the wise things they say once they decide they don't like you. I got to the Hearthstone 15 minutes early, habit. 30 years of being the first one in the room, checking the exits, reading the space before it fills with people. The lot was half gravel and half mud from a rain 3 days back, and my heels sank a little as I crossed it. Inside it smelled like hickory and yeast rolls and the green, cut smell of fresh flowers. Somebody had strung white lights along the rafters. There was a long table near the windows, dressed up nice, and a smaller round table off to the side near the kitchen door, set with paper napkins instead of cloth. I didn't know yet which table was mine. A man came out from the back carrying a tray, and he glanced at me the way you glance at any early guest, and then he didn't look away. He looked again. Longer. Something moved across his face that I recognized but couldn't place, the way you recognize a song before you remember its name. I didn't think much of it. People look at strangers. I went and found a chair near the window and sat down to wait, my knee humming its quiet warning about the rain. My mother came in around 5. 81 now, smaller every year, leaning on a cane she didn't used to need. Diane had her by the elbow, and I felt the old thing happen in my chest. The lift, the hope, the dumb animal part of me that has been waiting 54 years to hear that woman say one specific sentence to me. You know the one. The one with the word proud in it. There she is, my mother said when she saw me. Then, to Diane, not quietly enough, did she at least dress up a little? It's fine, Mom, Diane said. I stood and kissed my mother's cheek. She smelled like the same powder she's worn since I was small, and for 1 second the smell undid me a little, the way old smells do. Then she patted my arm and moved past me to the long table by the windows, to the chair at its head, and the moment closed back up like water over a stone. Hannah arrived with Brett and a swirl of cousins and friends, and the room filled, and the noise rose, and I did what I always do. I found the wall. I watched. I noticed things. I noticed that Diane had seated herself at the center of the long table and was telling Brett's mother a story with her hands. I noticed my mother was holding court at the head of it. I noticed there were name cards at the long table. Actual little folded cards. And that there wasn't one with my name on it. The man with the tray was watching me again from across the room. I caught his eye this time. He looked away fast, like a soldier caught staring at a superior, and I filed that away without knowing why. Diane came over to me holding 2 glasses of wine and gave me one. Her smile was the smile she's had since she was 9 years old and got the bigger bedroom. Warm on the surface, cold an inch under. "So glad you could make it," she said. "Wouldn't have missed it. We weren't sure with your schedule." A little laugh. "We never know with you. My schedule's pretty open these days, Diane." She sipped. Her eyes did a slow pass over my blouse, my slacks, my shoes, the way our mothers used to. "You could have worn something with a little color. It's a celebration, not a funeral." Another laugh, to take the edge off, the way she always took the edge off a knife right after she'd used it. "But that's you. Always so practical." I let it sit. Practical. The word my family used on me the way you'd use it on a sensible car. Reliable. Cheap to run. Nothing you'd choose if you had the money for better. "Listen," Diane went on, "the long table got a little tight with Brett's family. You don't mind sitting with Hannah's friends, do you? It's the fun table, honestly. You'll have a better time." The fun table. The round one by the kitchen door, with the paper napkins, where the 20-somethings were already laughing about something on a phone. "That's fine," I said. It was fine. I want to be clear that it was fine. I have eaten field rations standing up in a sandstorm. I have eaten Thanksgiving dinner over a folding table, in a plywood building, in a country where the power went out during the meal. Where I sit does not move me anymore. It was the way she said it that I noticed. "Sit with the kids. That's fine." Like she was doing me a kindness. Like a seat near my own family's table was a thing I had to be granted, and granted down. But Diane wasn't done. And this is where I want you to pay attention. Because the cruelty in a family is never one big blow. It's 100 small ones, spread out across an evening, each one deniable on its own. You add them up later, in the car, and only then do you feel the bruise. She walked me halfway to the round table, a hand on my arm like she was helping an old woman cross a street, and on the way she stopped at the long table to introduce me to Brett's mother. A kind-faced woman named Carol with a church lady brooch. "Carol, this is my sister Margaret. Maggie. Diane waved a hand vaguely in the direction of my whole life. "She's been away a lot. Works for the government, some kind of supply thing, very hush-hush." A wink at Carol, the kind that means there's nothing hush-hush about it. I'm being generous. She never married. No kids. So she's got more freedom than the rest of us, lucky thing. Never married. No kids, said warmly to a stranger, in the tone you'd use for a tragedy you'd made your peace with on someone else's behalf. As if the shape of my life were a small sad thing Diane had graciously decided not to dwell on. "That sounds important," Carol said to me kindly. "It had its moments," I said. "Oh, don't get her started," Diane said laughing, steering me onward. "She'll bore you to death about position forms. And here is the part that actually got under my skin. More than the table, more than the brooch, more than 30 years of practical. As Diane walked me away, I heard Carol, Brett's mother, a stranger, a church lady with a brooch, say quietly to her husband, "She seems lovely. I don't know why your daughter-in-law talks about her like that." A stranger saw it in 4 minutes. A stranger who owed me nothing, who'd known me for the length of a handshake, looked at how my own sister spoke about me and found it strange. That's the contrast that gets you, not the family's coldness on its own. The family's coldness next to a kind stranger's warmth, the two of them held up side by side, so you can see exactly how much you've been settling for. I took my wine to the round table and sat with the young people, who were polite to me in the bright, distracted way the young are polite to old aunts. And Frank Delgado, 61 years old, came across the room with a fresh tray. Here's what you have to understand about a chain of command. It doesn't leave you when you take the uniform off. It's wired in. A sergeant who served under a colonel does not become not a sergeant just because 30 years went by, and they're both standing in a barbecue restaurant in North Carolina. The body remembers. The spine remembers. Frank set his tray down on the round table. He looked at me, and then he didn't look away. And this time I knew the look, because I'd finally placed it. It was 2006. It was a forward operating base whose name I won't bore you with. And there was a young supply sergeant, Delgado, who I'd chewed out at length one night for a fuel requisition that didn't add up, and who, 3 weeks later, I'd kept out of a convoy that got hit, because I'd held him back to fix the very paperwork I'd chewed him out over. 2 of the men on that convoy didn't come home. Delgado would have been the 3rd truck. I never told him that's why I held him back. You don't tell them. You just carry it. He'd put on weight and lost his hair and gained a restaurant. But the eyes were the same. Colonel Calloway, Frank said. He didn't shout it. That's the thing people get wrong when they imagine moments like this. He said it quietly. The way you say a name in a church. But the room had that lull restaurants get between songs. And the word colonel carries in a quiet room. The fork in Diane's hand stopped halfway to her plate. It is you, Frank said. Ma'am, I wasn't sure. You look. He stopped, because what he wanted to say was, you look smaller out of uniform and you don't say that to a colonel. It's good to see you, ma'am. It's real good. The young people at my table had gone quiet and were looking back and forth between us. Sergeant Delgado, I said. You got fat. He laughed, a big, helpless, wet-eyed laugh, and wiped his hand on the towel and stuck it out, and then thought better of a handshake and pulled it back, and just stood there grinning like a fool with his eyes shining. Yes, ma'am, I sure did. At the long table by the windows, my mother was watching. Diane was watching. Brett's mother was watching. The whole room had turned, the way a room turns toward a sound it can't quite identify. You own this place? I asked Frank. Bought it 9 years ago, after I got out. 22 years I did, ma'am, in the end. Made Master Sergeant. He said it the way men say their best thing, hoping the person they most want to hear it does. I tell my kids about you. I tell them about the colonel who... Frank. I said it gentle, but it stopped him. There were things in that sentence I didn't need said out loud in a room full of strangers who thought I drove a forklift. It's a nice place. You did good. You held me back, he said. Quiet now. Just to me, except it wasn't just to me, because the room was so still. From the convoy, the fuel thing. I figured it out, ma'am. Took me a few years, but I figured out what you did. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. Frank straightened up. And I swear I didn't ask for this. Would have stopped it if I'd seen it coming. He came to attention. 61 years old, dish towel on his shoulder, in his own restaurant. Heels together, shoulders back. The whole posture of a man who has remembered, all at once and all the way down, exactly who he is standing in front of. It's an honor to have you in my house, Colonel, he said. You could have heard a pin drop on the gravel outside. I want to stop here and tell you something true. Because if ice is one of those stories where the underestimated woman gets her big moment and the music swells and everybody claps, nobody clapped. What actually happened in that silence was worse than a slap for the people at the long table, and I knew it would be, and a small ugly part of me. I won't pretend it wasn't there, was glad. Because a slap you can be angry about, a slap you can tell yourself a story about. What Diane and my mother got, in that silence, was the math. They watched a decorated master sergeant come to attention in his own business for the sister they'd just told to go sit with the children. And in the space of about 4 seconds, you could see them both running the same calculation behind their eyes. If this is true, if he's standing like that, then what does that make the last 30 years of how we talked about her? My mother's hand was flat on the white tablecloth. She didn't move it. Diane had set her fork down, finally, and her wine had gone untouched. And she was looking at me with an expression I had genuinely never seen on her face before in 54 years. She didn't know what to do with me. That was new. Diane always knew what to do with me. I was the family's known quantity. The disappointment, but a familiar disappointment, a managed one. And now a stranger in an apron had walked across the room and rearranged the furniture of her entire understanding. And she had no script. Hannah broke it. My niece. God bless her, she broke it the right way. Aunt Maggie, Hannah said from the long table in a small voice. You're a colonel? I was, I said. Like a real one? In the actual army? There's only the one kind, sweetheart. A boy at my table, one of Brett's groomsmen, said, that's so cool under his breath. And a couple of the young people laughed, not meanly, just the way the young laugh when the air gets too heavy and they need to let some out. And Frank, still standing there, said the thing that turned the whole night. He didn't mean to turn it. He thought he was just talking. 26 years of service, he said to Hannah, to the room, beaming. Combat tours. Ran logistics for a whole brigade. They don't give silver oak leaves to just anybody, miss. Your aunt. He looked at me, and his voice caught, and he pushed through it. There's men breathing today because of your aunt. I'm one of them. And then, because the Hearthstone on a Saturday is the kind of place old soldiers go, it turned out Frank wasn't the only one. There was a man at the bar I hadn't noticed, older than Frank, wearing a VFW cap, who had been nursing a beer and minding his business until the word Colonel carried across the room. He set the beer down. He came over, slow, with the rolling walk of a man with 2 bad hips, and he stopped a respectful few feet from my table. Calloway, he said. First name Margaret, that's me. You ran the resupply out of Anaconda. 0405. It wasn't a question. I drove a fuel truck on those convoys. We used to say there were 2 kinds of supply officers. The kind who sat in the air conditioning and signed forms, and the kind who came out to the line and looked you in the eye and made sure your truck was right before you rolled. He took his cap off, held it in both hands. You were the second kind, ma'am. There wasn't but a few of you. I'm 71 years old, and I remember everyone. He didn't salute. He was too old and too plain for salutes. He just stood there with his cap in his hands, which was its own kind of salute, the kind you can't teach. Then a woman spoke up. Younger, maybe 40, sitting 2 tables over with what looked like her husband and kids. She'd gone still when the old man started talking, and now she was half out of her chair. I'm sorry, she said. I don't mean to, but did you say Calloway, Colonel Calloway? She looked at me and her eyes were already wet. You wrote my mother a letter. In 2007, my father was Sergeant First Class Ray Okafor. He was on a convoy that, she stopped, steadied herself, went on. The official letter came from the army. But there was a second letter, a handwritten one, 3 pages, from his commanding officer's chain. My mother read it so many times the creases went soft. She kept it in her Bible till the day she died. She was crying openly now, not bothering to hide it. Was that you? The handwritten one? The one that knew his coffee order and the name of his dog? The room had gone past quiet into something else. Something church-like. His dog was named Biscuit, I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. He talked about that dog more than he talked about anything in the world. I'm sorry about your mother. They were good people, the both of them. The woman put her hand over her mouth and nodded, and couldn't say anything more, and her husband put an arm around her, and I had to look down at the burnt ends on my plate for a second and breathe. 3 of them. A master sergeant, a fuel truck driver, and a fallen soldier's daughter. None of them mine, none of them family. 3 strangers in a barbecue restaurant who stood up, one after another, and testified to the 30 years my own mother and sister had spent deciding I drove a forklift. That was the thing that broke my mother, not Frank's salute. The daughter's 3 soft creases in a Bible. I watched it land on her from across the room. I have buried soldiers. I have written letters to mothers. I have stood in the rain at attention while a bugle played and a flag got folded into a triangle and handed to a widow who couldn't make her hands stop shaking. I do not cry easily, and I did not cry then. But my mother did. I saw it, from across the room. 1 tear going down the powder on her cheek, and her flat hand on the tablecloth, pressing down like she was trying to hold the table still. I didn't go to her. I want you to know that. The old me, the 30 years younger me, the me that left this town hungry for her to say the word, that me would have crossed the room, would have knelt by her chair, would have taken that chance the way a starving person takes bread. I stayed where I was, at the round table, with the children, where she put me, and I let the silence do its work, because I had learned somewhere in those 30 years that silence has a way of making people fill it. You just have to be willing to outlast them. It was Diane who couldn't outlast it. She stood up from the long table and came over to me, and her face had sembled itself into something. Not warm, Diane doesn't do warm, but careful. The face she uses on people who turn out to matter. Maggie, she said, why didn't you, I mean? A colonel? You never said, you never asked. You let us think. I let you think what you already thought, I said. I never told you a single untrue thing, Diane, not once. You decided what I was a long time ago. I just stopped fighting you about it. She had no answer for that. She looked back at the long table, at our mother dabbing her cheek with a paper napkin, at Brett's family pretending very hard to be interested in their plates. "Mom's upset," Diane said. "I can see that. You should go talk to her." And there it was. Even now, even 30 seconds after the whole story flipped over, the reflex was the same. Maggie should manage Mom's feelings. Maggie should fix the room. Maggie's job is to make it comfortable again. "No," I said. "Just that, no." 6 letters. I'd learned a long time ago that my sharpest answers were the short ones. Diane blinked. "I'm going to finish my wine," I said, "with these nice young people, at the table you sat me at. And then I'm going to congratulate Hannah, because that's why we're here. And at some point tonight, or maybe not tonight, you and Mom and I are going to have a real conversation. But not because you need me to fix the room. We'll have it when I'm ready. Not before." Diane went back to the long table. Frank brought me a plate of brisket I didn't order, with the burnt ends on it, the good part, and he wouldn't take my money for it then or ever again. And I sat with Hannah's friends, and they asked me questions. Real ones, curious ones, the kind the young ask before the world teaches them not to. And for the first time, at a family gathering in longer than I could remember, I had a good time. That was the public part. The part everyone saw. If this were just a story about a woman getting her due in a room full of people, it could end there. And you'd feel that warm, satisfied feeling and click to the next video. But the real part of any story like this never happens in the room full of people. It happens later, behind a closed door, with the 2 or 3 people who actually shaped you. And I knew sitting there with my brisket and my borrowed sense of peace, that the harder night was still coming. First, though, came the small undoing of the story Diane had built. You don't get to watch that part usually. I did, because Asheville is a small enough town that everyone's threads run through everyone else's, and a thing said at a party on Saturday is all over the prayer chain by Monday. Carol called Diane that week. Brett's mother, the church lady with the brooch. I heard about it later, secondhand and thirdhand, the way you hear about everything in a town like ours. Carol called to say what a remarkable woman Maggie was, and wasn't it wonderful? And she'd been thinking about that handwritten letter to the Okafor family ever since. And this is the part that did the damage, she said gently, in the way church ladies deliver the sharpest things. "I'll be honest, dear, from the way you'd always talked about her, I expected someone quite different." Diane had spent 30 years being the one who told the family's story. She was the narrator, and the trouble with being the narrator is that the day someone checks your sources, every story you ever told gets reopened at once. People started doing the math on their own. The cousin who'd always wondered why Maggie couldn't make it to things, and now remembered that Maggie had been deployed. The aunt who'd repeated that Maggie didn't help with Mom, and now had to sit with the question of who exactly had been helping with Mom, because it sure hadn't been Diane's husband's boat payment. The golden child's shine is a borrowed thing. It's lit by the dimming of someone else. And when the someone else stands up to full height in a barbecue restaurant in front of 3 witnesses and a church lady, the borrowed light goes out, and the golden child is just standing there in the ordinary dark with the rest of us, blinking. I didn't do any of that to her. I want to be clear. I sat at the children's table and ate my brisket. The consequences came for Diane on their own, the way consequences do once the truth is loose. All I did was stop holding the lie up. It turns out a lie that heavy will fall the second you take your hands off it. It came home 11 days later. The phone call came on a Tuesday, at 8:45 in the morning, while my knee was telling me about more rain. It was the billing office at Mountain Vista, the assisted living facility where my mother had lived for the last 9 years. A pleasant woman named Sandra, who I'd spoken to once a month, every month, for 9 years, because I was the one who paid. "Colonel Calloway," Sandra said. She'd always called me that. She'd seen the paperwork. "I'm so sorry to bother you. We had a strange call. From your sister. She's asking to be made the financial contact on your mother's account. She seemed to think there'd been some kind of mistake about who's been covering the costs." "There's no mistake, Sandra." That's what I told her. But she got pretty insistent that the family had been paying, and I didn't want to. Well, I didn't want to say more than I should. I thought I'd check with you. I sat down at my kitchen table. For 9 years I had paid for my mother's care, $4,100 a month, more or less, depending on the year and her needs. When her own savings ran out in the 3rd year, savings Diane had helped her manage right into the ground. But that's a different story. I'd quietly set up an automatic transfer and never said a word. Not to Mom. Not to Diane. Not to anyone. Mom believed her old pension and Dad's insurance were covering it. Diane believed Mom's money was covering it. Nobody ever did the arithmetic, because doing the arithmetic would have required wondering about me, and nobody in my family had wondered about me in 30 years. I had spent, by that morning, something north of $400,000 keeping my mother in a place with a garden and a nurse, and a window that looked at the mountains. The arithmetic of it is its own quiet story. And I'll tell you the shape of it, because I think a lot of you are living some version of it right now and don't have anyone to compare notes with. It started small. The third year Mom was at Mountain Vista, Sandra called to say a payment had bounced. Mom's account was empty. This was a surprise to me, but it shouldn't have been, because the year before, Diane had taken over, helping Mom with her finances, which in practice meant a series of decisions that moved money out of safe, boring places and into Diane's husband's business. A landscaping outfit that was always one good season away from turning the corner and never did. I never accused anyone of anything. There was nothing to accuse exactly. It was all loans and gifts and helping family, documented in the loose way families document things, which is to say, not at all. By the time it surfaced, the money was just gone, the way money goes when nobody's watching it and everybody's trusting each other. So I had a choice. I drag it into the light, demand an accounting, force Diane to explain where Mom's retirement went, and watch my 81-year-old mother get moved to a cheaper place with a worse view because her daughters were at war over a landscaping business. Or I could quietly set up an automatic transfer on the first of every month and never mention it to a soul. You already know which one I picked. I'm the practical one. $4,100 a month, give or take. Through 2 surgeries and a hip and a long bad winter, when she nearly didn't make it and the bills doubled. Through the year I retired and money got tighter for me too, and I covered it anyway. Eating into the savings I'd built for a retirement I keep meaning to actually take. I never told her. I never told Diane. I let Diane go right on believing Mom's old money was stretching further than anyone had a right to expect, and I let Diane go right on telling cousins at Christmas that she was the one looking after Mom, and I passed the roles and I smiled. Why? People ask me that now. Sandra asked me, in her gentle way, more than once over the years. Why carry it alone? Why let her take the credit? Because the alternative was a fight that would have cost my mother her window. And because, I'll be honest, because I promised you I would be. Some superstitious, starving part of me believed that if I just did enough good in the dark, the light would find it. That's not wisdom. That's a 50-year-old wound running a grown woman's checkbook. I see that now. I didn't see it then, I never told her. I want to be very clear about that. I didn't do it to be told. I did it because she was my mother and that's what you do. And because some part of me, the small starving part, thought maybe that's what proud was. Maybe if I just did enough of the right thing in the dark, the light would find it eventually. Sandra, I said, can you do something for me? Of course, Colonel. Print out the full payment history, 9 years, every transfer, every date, every amount, and put it in an envelope. I'll come by this afternoon to pick it up. I can do that. And Sandra, if Diane calls again, you tell her exactly what you told me. There's no mistake. You don't have to protect anybody. Just tell the truth. I hung up. My knee ached. The rain came in around 2. I drove out to Mountain Vista that afternoon and picked up the envelope from Sandra, who squeezed my hand at the desk and didn't say anything, which was the kindest thing she could have done. Then I went and sat with my mother for an hour, the way I did every week, and I didn't mention any of it. We talked about the garden. She told me for the 4th time that month about a robin that had built a nest outside her window. She seemed happy. She always seemed happy on those visits. I'd built that happiness, transfer by transfer, in the dark, and she'd never known, and I'd never wanted her to. When I got up to leave, she caught my wrist. Margaret, she said. She used my full name when she was about to be serious. That man at the party. The one who owns the restaurant. Frank, he said there were men alive because of you. He was being kind, Mom. Was he? I looked at her. 81 years old. Smaller every year. Holding my wrist with a hand that had once held a wooden spoon over my knuckles when I sassed her, that had once braided my hair too tight for church, that had once, exactly once that I could remember, smoothed my hair back from my forehead when I had a fever at 9 years old and said, "You scared me, baby." in a voice I'd spent 50 years trying to hear again. No, I said. He wasn't being kind. He was telling the truth. She let go of my wrist. She looked out the window at the mountains for a long moment. Why didn't you ever tell us? She said. All those years. Why did you let Diane say those things about you? At Thanksgiving. At all of it. You just sat there and let her. And here is the question under the question. The one she was really asking. The one I'd waited 30 years to be asked. Why did you let me believe you were less than you were? I could have handed her the envelope right then. $400,000 of proof. I could have laid the whole 9 years on the table and watched it land. The old hunger wanted to. The old hunger has wanted to for 30 years. I didn't because I wanted to know, I said, if you'd love the daughter you thought I was. The one with nothing to offer. The forklift driver. The disappointment. I stood up and got my coat. Turns out I already had my answer. I just didn't want to hear it. I kissed her forehead. She didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say, and we both knew it, and for once I let the silence belong to her, instead of rushing in to fill it. Diane came to my house the next evening. I'd known she would. The thing about the truth is that it doesn't sit quiet once it's loose in a family. It moves. It finds the cracks. She stood on my porch in the gray light, and Earl's flag snapped on its pole next door. And she looked at my little brown house the way she'd looked at my blouse at the party, doing the math, recalculating. This is where you live, she said. This is where I live. Mom told me. About the money, about Mountain Vista. She wasn't crying. Diane doesn't cry, but her voice had a thing in it I'd never heard. 9 years, Maggie. You paid for 9 years and you let me. At every holiday, I'd tell people I was the one taking care of her. I'd say it right in front of you. And you never. I never corrected you. No, why not? And now there was anger in it, which I understood, because anger is easier than the other thing. Why would you let me humiliate myself like that? Standing there taking credit for your money. Do you have any idea how I feel right now? Do you have any idea how stupid? This isn't about how you feel, Diane. She stopped. For 30 years, I said, every conversation in this family has been about how you feel, how Mom feels, whether the room is comfortable. And I was the one who made it comfortable. I sat at the children's table, so you wouldn't have to feel tight at the big one. I paid for Mom's care so you wouldn't have to feel the weight of it. I let you tell your stories about me, so you wouldn't have to feel small next to the truth. I have spent my whole life managing this family's comfort, and not one single time did anyone wonder if I was comfortable. The flag snapped. Somewhere down the road, somebody's pickup turned over twice before it caught. I'm not angry at you, I said, and I meant it, which surprised me as much as it surprised her. I used to be. I'm too tired now. I just want you to hear one thing, and then you can go home and feel however you're going to feel about it. What? Respect isn't something you give people because of what they turn out to be worth. A colonel, a bank account, a man standing at attention. That's not respect, that's recalculation. You're standing on my porch right now, because 11 days ago you found out I was somebody. That's not the same as having seen me. I looked at her. You decide what your sister is worth when you think she's worth nothing. That's the only time the measurement is honest. And you already took that test, Diane. Both of you did. A long time ago. She didn't have anything to say to that. You can come in, I said. I've got coffee on. We can start figuring out how to do better if you want to. Mom's not going to be here, forever. And I'd rather we weren't strangers when she goes. But you don't get to come in here and make this about your humiliation. That table's closed. Diane stood on the porch a long moment. Then she did something I didn't expect. She didn't come in, not yet. She sat down on the top step of my porch, in her nice party clothes from a party that was 11 days gone, and she put her face in her hands and her shoulders went, and the sound that came out of her was nothing like crying as I'd ever heard her do it. Diane's crying. The times I'd seen it was a performance with an audience in mind. This wasn't. This was the sound a person makes when a story they've told themselves for 30 years comes apart in their hands, and they finally see what was underneath it. I sat down next to her on the step. I didn't touch her. We aren't a touching family. That's another thing I could lay at our mother's feet but won't, tonight. I knew, Diane said into her hands. That's the thing I can't. I knew you were the one paying. Not the amount, I didn't know the amount. But I knew Mom's money was gone, because I'm the one who... She couldn't finish it, and she didn't have to. And the money kept coming anyway. And I never asked where from. Because if I asked, I'd have to know. So I just told myself it was working out. I told myself I was handling it. She lifted her face. Her makeup was a ruin. I told people I was handling it, Maggie. I stood in your face and said it. And the whole time it was you. You let me. Why would you let me? And I almost gave her the speech. I had it loaded. 30 years of it. The children's table and the worn-out practical and the what will I tell people. I could have laid every receipt of it on that porch step and made her carry the full weight. And she'd have deserved it, and it would have felt, for about 4 seconds, like winning. But I was looking at my sister, 56 years old, sitting on my step with her ruined face, and I realized something that took the wind out of the whole speech. She was a scared person. She'd always been a scared person. The pretty one, the loud one, the narrator. All of it was scaffolding around someone who'd decided early that she had to be the favorite because being the favorite was the only safe thing to be in our mother's house, and who had spent her whole life terrified that if she ever stopped being the favorite, she'd be nothing. That's why she had to make me small. Not because she hated me. Because in the economy our mother built, there was only so much love, and Diane had grabbed for all of it the way a drowning person grabs, and never once felt like she had enough. That's not an excuse. I want to be careful here. Understanding why someone hurt you is not the same as deciding it didn't hurt. Some damage survives the understanding. Diane and I will carry this to the end. There's no version of the next 20 years where we're the sisters who braid each other's hair. The story doesn't fix that. Stories that promise you the full fix are lying to sell you a feeling. But I found, sitting on that step, that I didn't want to win anymore. Winning is a young person's hunger. I was too tired and had buried too many people to want to spend what was left of my mother's life, and my sister's holding a $400,000 receipt over a scared woman's head. I let you, I said, because the only thing I had that was mine, the one thing nobody in this family could take or take credit for, was being the kind of person who'd do it anyway. Quietly, without the receipt. You can have the credit, Diane. You always could have had the credit. I never once needed the credit. What I needed was for somebody in this family to see me without it. And you couldn't, and Mom couldn't. And I had to go all the way to a barbecue restaurant and a master sergeant to find out I was visible to anybody at all. The flag snapped on Earl's pole. A pickup turned over twice down the road and caught. I'm sorry, Diane said. It came out small and cracked and entirely without performance, and I believe it might have been the first fully true sentence she'd said to me since we were girls. I don't know how to be different, but I'm sorry. I know you are, I said. That's a start. It's not the whole thing, but it's a start. And then I did touch her, finally, put a hand on her shoulder, the one practical gesture our family allows, and I said, come inside. The coffee's getting cold, and you'll catch your death out here in those shoes. She came in. I poured her a coffee, and we sat at my kitchen table, the one with the wobble in the leg I keep meaning to fix. And we started, badly and slowly, the way real things start, to talk. It wasn't a clean ending. I want to be honest with you about that, because the clean ones are usually the lies. My mother never said the word, the one with proud in it. I'd waited 54 years, and I think some part of me will wait the rest of them. What she said instead, 3 weeks later, on a different Tuesday, holding my wrist by the window with the robin's nest, what she said was, I think I had it backwards. About my girls. I think I had it backwards the whole time. It wasn't the word. But it was true, and it cost her something to say, and at 81 with the mountains in the window, true and costly is most of what any of us can manage. I took it. I held it. Some hungers you stop trying to fill all the way, and just learn to carry, the way I carry the knee. Diane and I are not close. We may never be close. But she calls now, sometimes. And once she called just to ask how my knee was doing before the rain, and I had to put the phone down for a second, because I didn't have a place to put a feeling like that. Frank Delgado caters my Thanksgiving now, won't take a dime. Says it's the cheapest he'll ever get to thank me. There's a photo on the wall of his restaurant. He asked my permission, and I gave it, after 30 years of bare walls, of a young supply sergeant and a colonel standing in front of a fuel depot in a country neither of us misses, both of us squinting into a sun that set a long time ago. Here's the lesson, if there is one, and I've turned it over enough nights to think there might be. We are all going to be, at some point, the persons standing in the room that everyone has decided is worth nothing. The aunt at the children's table. The new hire, the quiet one, the one with the worn coat. And we are all going to be, just as often, the ones doing the deciding. Looking at someone and pricing them by their shoes, their job, their bank account, their usefulness to us, and seating them accordingly. The measure of a person isn't taken when the master sergeant stands up. Anybody can be decent to a colonel. The measure is taken in the long, ordinary years, before anybody knows what you're worth. In how you treat the person you're certain can do nothing for you. My family failed that test for 30 years. They'd tell you now they didn't, but they did. And the difference between us isn't that I passed it. It's that I stopped needing them to know I had. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been the one sent to sit with the children, or if you ever, in an honest moment, been the one doing the sending, then sit with that a while. You don't owe anybody an announcement of your worth. But you do owe the people around you the basic dignity of not pricing them before you've met them. Most of us only learn that lesson from the wrong side of it. If somebody came to mind while you were listening, somebody you might have underestimated, or somebody who might have underestimated you, maybe today's the day you let them surprise you. A note before you go. The arrangements in this story, paying privately for an aging parent's long-term care, the question of who becomes the financial contact on an elder's account, the slow disaster of letting someone manage savings without oversight, are real situations that families across this country face every single day, usually without anyone standing up at a party to make it clear who carried the weight. Elder care law and financial power of attorney work differently from state to state, and what made sense for my mother in North Carolina might be structured another way where your family lives. If anything here made you think about your own parents, please don't sort it out from a comment section. Sit down with a licensed elder law attorney, or start with the National Council on Aging. Their elder care resources and helpline at 1-800-677-0111 can point you toward what's real and what's a scam. I'm not a lawyer, and nothing I've told you is legal advice. I'm just someone who learned, later than I'd like to admit, that the people who carry a family quietly are usually the last ones we think to thank. Go find yours. Don't wait for a man in an apron to do it for you.